A couple more strategies. This actually pertains to a lot of students with disabilities. I know that some of you mentioned a couple of these in your previous presentations. One of them is you should break up tasks into smaller pieces of directions. So, and this also applies to lesson plans as well. Also, you need to make learning relevant to their interests. So, one example that I heard was if you're teaching math to a student and they really like dinosaurs, maybe in your problem you should include a reference to dinosaurs instead of like lions. Also, you need to allow students more time to handwrite. Sometimes it just takes them longer. Also, we suggest that you allow them to use technology aids like computers to let them have note-taking. And then you need to make book teaching visually stimulating.
And one of the reasons it needs to be visually stimulating, as well as having like word representations and speaking, is that as many different pathways as you can create to make those connections in their brain, the more likely it is that that information is going to stick with them.
Okay, so in case some people were not aware, we actually had a few elements of an inclusion classroom during this presentation. So we want you to list a few that you may or may not have noticed.
Visually stimulating material.
Oh, good job.
Directness and communication.
Exactly. We use full sentences throughout, including in our slide. So full sentences, great.
Kind of combining what they said, like, you explained everything like thoroughly. Like, I was like wondering why he was over the top there at one point. Why did you explain it over the top? And then also you said create a diagram in a diagram. Well, more or less.
I would also like to point out that only half the lights are on this room.
Awesome.
Good catch. Yeah, it's extremely organized. Started out telling us what exactly we're going to do and how you're going to present it.
Yeah. It's really important for students with autism to know what is acceptable and what's not. Like when I told you that you may use your computers, I had to specify that it is not for recreational purposes. It is for note-taking. Yes.
Not another thing, but like Bradley was saying, how he kind of noticed almost like that you were maybe doing something like under our awareness. Yeah, it almost felt like a little unnatural. So it makes sense that you were like really attempting. So you did a good job, I guess.
One of the things
We got broken up into smaller groups.
Yeah.
I didn't get to sit in my seat.
One of the things that we really wanted to do with this presentation, because unlike what the other groups were able to do, where they were able to kind of model what it would be like for a student with that disorder, we can't really do that with autism. One, because it's so broad and just in general, it's so case specific that it's not, no two cases are alike. So one of the things that we're really hoping that you get from this experience here is what it's like to be a student in an inclusion class who is not autistic, and then also what kind of accommodations you need to make as teachers, because this is a different teaching style than we are used to.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to make this presentation more teacher-centered as opposed to student-centered. So, did you have a question?
I was just going to say that I was just like thinking about like how good this presentation was throughout it, and so maybe it's one of those cases again where it's good for everybody, not just the student who might specifically have those needs, because I definitely, feel like just like the way the information was presented was a slightly better format than the past two previous presentations.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about all these accommodations and strategies, because it also applies to other students who have disabilities and also those who don't. Like when we were talking about the organization binder, I know I would have benefited if I had a schedule on every one of my binders and color-coded it. I still color-code my planner with different pens. So.
And one of the factors is to, especially in a secondary setting, in any school setting, but especially in secondary, it's very inappropriate to kind of single out autistic students. And so making these accommodations and having every student be involved in them, having every student have time to go to the quiet area if they need it, it's good for every student. And that is the whole point of differentiation.
I have a question. For us as music ed majors, how should we go about having a quote-unquote quiet section? Because music classrooms aren't really quiet areas. They're either rehearsing a section or you're trying to teach, and there's a lot of parts going on at one time, and you can't really affect other students to not be practicing what they're supposed to be doing?
I actually thought of that a little bit because I was thinking about how this would apply to us. And one of the things I was thinking about, I remember specifically in some of our music classes, last fall we did station work, and I was thinking music-wise, one of the points with the quiet space and quiet station is that it's that individual time where if anything's going on, you can calm down, find your center again, and be able to focus and go back to work. And in a music classroom, a great thing with that would be like an area with headphones, and you can just listen to music. And if you need to be working on your part, but you can't really handle being around all the other students right now, you can listen to your part on a CD and work on that on your own at that point.
All right, so we just wanted to mention a few of the things that you may or may not have noticed. I think all of you hit on every single one of them.
The one that we didn't get was the one that Dr. Carpenter actually does for us every day. Reading aloud the important information. And then one thing we wanted to add to where we called you out, Emily, was interpreting in our own words. And that's important. That's really important too, because it's not just seeing it visually. It's not just hearing us say it. It's students saying it as well, and then having their own personal interpretation. So that is 4 different levels of the same information. So it's really going to stick with this with students, and whether they're visual learners or auditory learners.
You really do need to get a verbal response from students to know if they actually understood the material. So, okay. All right, we already started a few questions, but we also wanted you to maybe share a few personal experiences with autism, or if you have any concerns.
Real quickly, can you go back to the slide with the no Facebook? I just want to point out the little image there. Right, so there's a visual there that backs up the behavior. So just wanted to point that out. That would be a common accommodation that you would try and do for students with autism, is have visuals related to behavior expectations, as well as obviously content and things like that.
One of the things that when we started this, we were talking about, one of the reasons I wanted to work with autism is because I have a family friend who's autistic, and we were talking about personal experiences, and that's why we kind of went into like this time if anyone has any personal experiences. And I know for me, there was one girl who our family friend was friends with, and I met her in middle school, and she used to ride my bus, and we interacted a couple times, but it was a very, like you saw with it, when Erica was talking, speaking with her, it was kind of difficult. And there was a few years when I went to high school, and then she ended up going to a different school, and I didn't see her for about 3 or 4 years, and I came home for my first year of college and ran into her at the grocery store, and this girl who I had maybe 4 or 5 conversations with remembered my name 3 years later. And so one of the things, and again, only 4 or 5 conversations, that's not even true for students and people who don't have autism, so, or some people who don't have autism. And so like one of the things that we also wanted to point out, like autism, like I said in the video, it's not just a complete deficit. There are other things that are stronger, especially with Asperger's syndrome. That's why, especially if this is important for IEPs and 504s, their students are going to have specific strengths that really help them in some areas. So in your inclusion classroom, you may have a student who really struggles with social interactions, but they can see a math problem and get it immediately.
And that kind of goes into my personal experience. My next door neighbor has Asperger's syndrome. I'm a history major. I mean, I have class with a bunch of you. And I mean, I love history, but I'm actually not very good with dates. But this next door neighbor of mine loves history and can name off dates of specific events like clockwork. It's unbelievable. So it is important to recognize that children with autism do have very really good strengths. And it's important to recognize that because, as we always talk about in this class, we focus a lot on the disability. We don't actually focus on a student's strength. So it's important to reiterate that strengths exist in all of us. So.
Does anybody have any like specific, have they ever met anybody with an autistic disorder or anything like that that they feel like?
I worked all through high school with students with autism, actually. I did Special Olympics, and I also worked with summer camps at the Durham Parks and Recreation Center. And so I have extensive experience with students with autism, also other sorts of disorders. And it's honestly amazing the types of interesting conversations that you can have, because they're real people. They're not, like, it's hard, I hate saying they, because it's not a they, they're people just like us. It's not like an us and them type thing. They're just like us. And so it's hard for me to like really try and like make that separation between us and them, because they're students, they're wanting to learn, they want to have the same experiences that we do. There's no separation. And what I was experiencing with my Special Olympics cheerleaders is that they were just as good, if not better, than the cheerleaders that I worked with in my practices at learning the material, making sure that their motions were tight and what they needed to be. And we actually won states when I was in cheerleading. When I coached them in high school, which was really good.
Awesome. My freshman year of high school, we did hats, and there was a girl who was a junior who had Asperger's syndrome, and I remember, like, I didn't notice anything at first until one of the upperclassmen had said something, and she only spoke to us in character, and she only called us our character names. She couldn't tell you what our real names were, she only could tell you our character names, which was interesting because all of them aren't actual like names, they're all like named things. And I remember she was having a really rough dance rehearsal one day, and our choreographer freaked out on her because, and everyone knew at that point that she had Asperger's, but the director and choreographer didn't really care, and she just lashed out anyway. And I remember the repercussions of that were just so strong because the girl that had Asperger's freaked out, and it was like, we all felt horrible for her, and so like people were trying to calm her down, but everyone was trying to help, which overwhelmed them more. It was just, it was kind of not okay. Like, everything turned out okay eventually, but it was just like, you don't do that to anybody.
And that's a real example of like the disruption in a routine and what that can do to an autistic student.
Isn't like autism on the rise, or isn't there like some kind of like
1 in 88,
genetic
and
like
and it's like even more prevalent
for
in boys.
males? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
1 out of 54 for boys, and I think it's 1 out of 257 for girls, I believe, that's the statistic. So it's definitely more prevalent in boys, but it's one of those things where, especially now that they're seeing more causes behind it, and it has to do with gene mutations, and because of that, and now that it's the umbrella where it encompasses so much, and now we also have that section of the umbrella where you don't have to fit all 4 of those criteria, it's becoming a much more broad spectrum, but that's also why, and education is addressing this by inclusion classrooms. There's no longer just that separation.
My first year in my sorority, when we were learning the statistics going into recruitment for Autism Speaks and talking about autism, my first year was 1 in 110, and this year it's 1 in 88. So it's highly on the rise. Just to give you a little update.
Yeah, a little info. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Give them some love.